Hi everyone, this is Lydia Bryseth, the manager of Colorin, Colorado, and I'm so happy to be here today with Katie Padilla. Katie, thank you so much for being here. Katie is an ESOL specialist at Mason Crest Elementary School in Annandale, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. And we're going to be talking about collaborating today on behalf of English language learners. So not only will we be hearing from Katie, but we hope to hear your questions, your comments. We already have some great questions that have been submitted, so thank you. And please share and like this post as we go through it. We want to take a moment to thank our partner, the National Education Association, who has made this event and our other Facebook Live series possible. Thank you so much. And also to the American Federation of Teachers that has been a longtime supporter of Colorin, Colorado. Thank you, NEA and AFT. So we're just going to jump right in here with Katie Padilla. And Katie, I was wondering, you actually worked as a classroom teacher before you became an ESOL specialist. Could you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to make that switch to work more with English language learners?
Sure. So I was a classroom teacher for 8 years at the 4th grade level, and I always wanted to work in a diverse setting, and even went to teach abroad. I studied Spanish as a second language all through college, so language was something that I enjoyed learning and working with. And then as I was working with my students, realized that, you know, really this is something that there are lots of English learners and they need English in my classroom. But more than that, I was realizing as I was working with ESOL teachers that the strategies they were giving me to use with English learners were really working for all of my students. And I was like, you know, if I wanted to do something other than be a classroom teacher, I would really like to be an ESOL teacher because I had such good models working with me. And then when I became an ESOL teacher, I kind of promised myself that I would never forget what it's like to be a classroom teacher because I had spent so many years having other ESOL teachers come into my room to support, and I wanted to be that kind of support for other teachers in my practice.
That's great, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this topic with you, because you have both perspectives and you've worked in a lot of different settings, so you're very empathetic to different points of view and you have a lot of different experiences. Can you explain what some of the benefits are for English language learners when the adults who work with them are collaborating?
I think there's a lot. I mean, for one, I think anytime you can have more role models in a child's life, the better it is. And so by already bringing other teachers into the room, you have that. And then those students have another person as a support in their life, which is one. But more than that, a classroom teacher, there's already a lot on their plate. And for them to try to provide for all of the needs in that room, it's a lot to ask of one person. So when teachers are collaborating, then you get the support to provide support to students. And we talk about, as ESOL teachers, we bring another lens to what teachers are seeing. So as they're describing things that are happening in the classroom or problems that they're facing, we're able to look at it from a different perspective. And as we share that perspective, then classroom teachers see it in a different way. And that can actually stimulate their ideas of how to address the problem. So it doesn't have to just come from someone else, but it's having those conversations, that it's not, like, one person is not going to have all of the answers. And so when you imagine a class of 25 students, that's 25 strengths, 25 weaknesses, 25 different needs that one person is never going to be able to solve all on their own. And so, but in that collaboration, though, you're able to get at what students really need and provide that support.
And in terms of thinking about looking at from a positive or a strengths-based point of view, you know, that it's a good example of saying, why isn't this teacher seeing what I'm seeing? For example, as an ELL teacher, as an ESOL specialist, or as a bilingual teacher, you may look at data or you may notice a pattern someone else does, and we had been talking about how you can get frustrated that other people aren't seeing what you're seeing, right? But then turning it around and saying, but that's my role, that's why I'm here.
Exactly. You know, and you see, I think when you start to see things in a new light, it's hard not to see them that way. So it's having to remember that it took me a while to learn to see things, you know, just to look at data and see, oh, this is what the data is saying, or I can see this. But realizing it took me a while to see that. And so someone else is not going to see that right away. And so then it's my responsibility to speak up, to advocate for those students, but also to train other teachers to look at it that way and to see that, oh, this problem area that you're seeing, well, what if we looked at it this way? Maybe the student is really good in this area, and so how can we bring that into this area where they're struggling so that we really can use their strengths to help them in that area.
So thinking about ESOL specialists, bilingual teachers who want to collaborate more and where they're going to start, I know one of the areas you've focused on really is building a relationship. Can you talk about why that's important and what some early steps are in building that connection?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was the thing that really changed for me, moving from being a classroom teacher to being an ESOL specialist, ESOL teacher, is that I was going into classrooms where I was no longer the classroom teacher, and so I wasn't the one that students immediately went to. And then having that perspective, not being at the front of the room, but maybe being at the back and seeing what was going on, and realizing that my role was different, but I still wanted to have some kind of impact in the room, and that I could only do that by partnering with the teacher. That it wasn't going to be, okay, this is my turn it's my day to be up front, now it's your turn, you know, that like we needed to work on this together. And as I went into each classroom, realized, oh, every teacher has their own style, which I think I knew in the back of my mind, but as a classroom teacher, I wasn't going into other rooms, so I wasn't necessarily seeing that. So I was always coming from my own perspective, but then going into, at the time, 4 different classrooms and realizing, wow, each of these teachers does it their own way. I need to learn how to do that with them, you know, like to join their style rather than just trying to change it. And so that took time, you know, I had to learn their styles, but then it also took getting to know each teacher and realizing what is it that they're most interested in, or what are the strengths that they're bringing, how can I partner with this person. So getting to know them, getting to know their style, then getting to know the students so that we could have conversations about if we were noticing in the data that there was an area of need, for me to say, well, I've noticed you've been doing this and you've been using this strategy really well. Let's do more of that, and maybe we can try this as well. So it's adding on to what they're doing and not walking in and say, you need to do it this way, because no one wants to be told what to do. And that's not going to build the relationship. So it's always looking at how can I add to what this teacher is doing, not just change what they're doing.
And if you want to start a collaborative relationship, what are those steps in the beginning that you take to reach out and even start the conversation? How do you think people can approach that?
I mean, it happens different ways. So I think sometimes, you know, ideally a teacher will come and ask you for support, and then in that case you just say like, okay, let me come in and observe, like let me come in and see what's happening in the room, and then we can talk about like what you're seeing and what I'm seeing, and you know, kind of come up with where we want to go next. But I never say, you know, like in a separate meeting outside of the room, oh, let's do this, because I need to go in and see what's happening. You need that observational data, not just some numbers on a page. So I always start there, because then also, again, gives me a chance to see what is this teacher already doing, where are they most comfortable, you know, like where's our starting point. So I would say definitely getting into the room with that teacher is one. And if a teacher doesn't invite you in, then I know for me, when I was first starting, it was just saying to the whole team up front, hey, I'm just going to pop into all of your rooms to get to know the students, or, you know, just to see like how it's going in here, what you all are doing. And so then I just made it a habit to go into each room and sort of at predictable times, so they knew that I was coming. So then it was also making sure that classroom teachers were comfortable with me being in there. So once I was there, then they were more willing to ask, you know, can you help me with this? Or what do you think about this activity? Do you think that will work? And so then it was more of a natural conversation. So I think, you know, anyone wants, just like students, teachers want to be known and they want to be noticed for what they are doing. And the way for us to do that is to be in the room. And really, I want to be with the students, so it's a win-win. Like, I get to be in there working with students, and I also get to be in there building a relationship with the teacher. So
it sounds like part of the goal is to build trust between the two
absolutely
people, right?
Yes, because I think in education it can be hard. We feel like we're on the spot all the time, or that we're having to justify decisions that we make, or there's kind of it's easy to jump to this defensive attitude. And when we see ourselves as a team working together and we build that trust, like, we really are going to reach greater levels of success for our students. But that doesn't come automatically, and so it does take time. And there are, little things that we do every day to build that trust. For instance, if I say I'm going to be there, I need to be there. And I remember as a classroom teacher, if someone said they were coming to my room and at the last minute they said, oh, sorry, I have this going on, I'm not going to make it, I was planning on having that support. And so in the last minute I'm scrambling. And I never want to put another teacher in that circumstance that I experienced if I don't have to, And so I try to keep open lines of communication with teachers, holding to my commitments. Or again, if I say, oh, I'm going to bring in this resource for these couple students, like, I'm going to modify it, make it work for them, then I need to make sure I give it to them, and not just that day when I walk in, but that they have time in advance to see it and make sure that it fits in. So it's all those little things. And again, that's getting to know the teacher. What is it they need? I was joking about how I realized, I'm kind of sometimes my inspiration comes at the last minute and I change things on the fly, and that works for me. But that's not really fair to show up to someone else's room and they had a plan in mind and just change it on the fly, if that's a person who needs a day in advance to just get everything prepared. So it's learning, how do we work well together? And the way I work with one teacher might not be the same way I work with another teacher, because we each have our own styles, personalities, and that's part of the fun too, is that's how we learn from each other.
And even getting specific about how you're communicating, when you're communicating, what the expectations are. What are some things that you've learned about that?
So I've definitely learned that in person is always best. I would rather have a face-to-face conversation with someone, whatever it is that we're talking about, because there's just so much more you get from having an in-person conversation. But that's not always feasible. And so it's also being flexible with how are we going to communicate. Is it over email? Is it by text? Sometimes it's just leaving a note on a piece of paper as I leave the room, saying that was great, I can't wait to check in later. Or it could be, like if we're doing an activity and I don't get to stay for the end, or obviously if one teacher's working with a couple students that I'm not with, it's coming up with where are we going to put all of this information, all the data, so that we both have access to it, so we both can be thinking about it, so that the next time we do meet, I've already had a chance to look at how they did, even if I wasn't there when it was happening. But all of those are details that have to be talked about. Again, it's kind of like creating the norms of your team, like how are we going to function so that things work smoothly? And then when they don't, how are we going to address that? Like, what kind of conversation are we going to have? And being willing to be uncomfortable sometimes, to just say, like, that didn't really work for me. Is it possible that we could try XYZ, whatever it is? But being able to honestly speak our needs to one another, because it's a working relationship. So.
Right, and having the feedback loop, so
Absolutely.
That there's kind of an expectation that you can speak honestly and open it. As
Yes.
you said, this didn't quite work, this seemed to be good, maybe with this student we should try something else, or whatever it is that
Yes.
can be helpful, so that you can learn from the successes and then change what's not working.
Yes.
And become more confident as a team together.
Exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take just a minute to welcome everybody who's watching. Hi everybody, this is Lydia from Colorin, Colorado. We're on Facebook Live with Katie Padilla, an ESOL specialist, and Katie has a lot of experience working, collaborating, but also as a classroom teacher and being on the other side of having somebody come into the room. Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned that there was a little bit of that dynamic of how do I best use this person in the room, and I use that word, sort of in quotes, how do I use the person, almost like a glorified assistant is what a lot of ESOL and ELL teachers say is their experience. They go in and perhaps they're sent to do some kind of maybe they ask them to make copies, and so there's all of this expertise that the teachers have that the classroom teacher may not really understand what their role is or what they know, right? And so how do you kind of get past that that block of I'm not here exactly to be an assistant, I'm here to be supportive and I'm here to assist, but I'm not necessarily as an assistant to the teacher.
Right. And excuse me, I do think that's possible, and it does happen, you know, because like I said, when we walk into the room, we're no longer at the front, it's kind of at the back of the room to start, especially if you're observing, getting used to it. And so then teachers kind of get used to like, oh, that's your place over there. And not that anything has been explicitly said, it's just sometimes making those assumptions. So I think to break that, I've found that when I first go in, you know, again, I'm watching, I'm learning, and there as a learner at all times. And then I'll say, you know, and if they need help with anything, then I am going to jump in and help, because I want them to know I am here to help and support. I'm not going to say no when you ask things of me. But then I'll also come back and say, you know, I'd love to help with the focus lesson. How about let's pick a day next week and I'll do the focus lesson if that'll help you out, and we can plan it together, because I think I'd like to try this out. Is that possible? And I think that's the other thing too, when you want to establish that you're equals in the room, then you have to see that each of us can do all the jobs in the room. And so I know, switching from being a classroom teacher to being the ESOL teacher, I wasn't teaching as many focus lessons. I wasn't the one up front anymore. But then finding those opportunities, because I think there's so many benefits to when we step into those different roles. For one, I think then the students start to see us as equals too, which is what happened, that there's two teachers in this room. It's not just one teacher and an assistant, that we're both here to support all of you, and that we are the same, we're a team, we're working together, and so that models for students what we want to be happening. But at the same time, when I take that opportunity to step in front to teach the focus lesson, it allows the teacher to see things from a different perspective as well, and then they start to see like, oh, this is what my students are seeing, so they get that chance to put on a different lens. But then at the same time, that's my opportunity to then model what are some other strategies or structures that we can use to support English learners. And that modeling is something that has been shown, like that's what teachers need. They need to see it in action. We don't just always learn by reading, oh, I should do this. It's seeing it, oh, and then saying, I could do that, oh, I can do that. And then when they see the success, building on success. But that's not always to say that I'm going to teach the best focus lesson. We've been talking about, you know, as an ESOL teacher, when I'm not in the classroom all day, every day, I don't necessarily have the same classroom management skills that the classroom teacher does. But then I can go back and say, oh, that's your strength. Can you really show me what strategies, what classroom management strategies you use during your focus lesson? Because I'd like to do that so that it's seamless in here, that we can do the same. But you're acknowledging that teacher's strengths. So you're saying, you're bringing this to the table. I'd like to bring these strategies and other things to the table, but we're both bringing them as equals. So always being able to recognize the strengths that the classroom teacher brings and that the ESOL specialist brings. But again, it's also being willing to be uncomfortable, you know, like to be willing to step into different roles and not just saying, well, I'm just going to support these two students back here. Instead, looking at these are all of our students, we're sharing all of them.
And do you think there are some strategies for sort of sharing expertise in terms of, here's what I do as the ESOL or the bilingual teacher, here's how we can identify some of the strengths and strategies and skills that everyone's different role, the classroom teacher, the special education, particularly at the beginning of the year. Have you found some good ways so that people have even before they've really started working together, there's a little bit of a better sense of how that can work?
That's a good question. I think at the beginning it is kind of talking about roles, you know, and like who we are, and that's part of the getting to know you. But then also, I know we always start off sharing celebrations from the previous year, or having the opportunity to share things that we're really proud of, or things that have gone well. And then I think when you're able to share some of that success and they hear it, then it's like, oh, she can, like, she's able to do that. Oh, she can bring that. Oh, maybe she'd want to try that out in my room. Or, oh, I'd really like for her to come try that because I know I need help in that area. So it's creating those opportunities to share those things. So we were saying, even at the beginning of the year, doing that team building, those icebreakers, all those little things that get people to share. And then that's how, we don't always love to talk about ourselves, but when you build that in as an activity, you learn a lot about each other. And it's true. I don't think everyone knows right away. There's a reason that I'm the ESOL specialist in the room. Like, I have been trained. This is what I love to research and know about. But then not everyone knows that. So it is on me to share some of that, to bring that up, and in a supportive way. Not as a, well, I know this. It's like, oh, now that you bring up that XYZ, it has me thinking about, I did read about this, maybe we could try it out. So it's just like any relationship. It's all in how you're doing it.
Give and take. One of the questions that we have gotten, which I think is pretty common, is, how do you not make this sound like more work? And that comes from Erica Molina, because it is a different way of working and a different level of effort, but especially if you're in a school where collaboration is not the norm. How do you respond to that?
So I would say, start small. Find one teacher that you already have a relationship with, that you feel comfortable with, and work with that one teacher, and really focus on that as the one collaborative relationship that you're going to build. Because when you start small and you can experience success, then it's going to build. Because once that teacher sees what can happen in their room, they're going to share with other teachers. Like, oh, well, Katie's been here, we've been doing this, and then someone else will want to try it, and it kind of can spread organically. But I would say start small, because a lot of times we're like, I have to do it for everyone. And yes, you want to get there, but you can't start there. So just start with one. And it starts by saying, you have these English learners in your room, and I've really wanted to work with them or see how things are going. Again, can I come in? I'd like to observe. But then also, like, can you show me, like, how do you think your class is doing overall? Is there something that you'd like to work on that I can support you with? Again, getting the feedback from the teacher. And then as you're looking at the data, whatever that is, it doesn't have to be test data. It can also be observational data, what you're noticing. Are the students engaged? And then coming up with a common goal. Like, what is it that we want to work together on? What are we trying to achieve? We want all of our students to have success, but right now, what is the goal? And then when you have that common goal, that's what really creates the team atmosphere. Okay, we're going to work on this together. So here are my ideas. What are your ideas? Let's try it out. And then having the reflective conversation. So how do you think it went? What do you think? And sometimes it comes automatically. And even if it didn't work, that's okay, because you still have your common goal, you have your starting point, and you say, all right, that one didn't work, let's try something else. So then it's always a work in progress. It's never done. But that's kind of the exciting part, is that it has the potential to grow and get better, that we're never just perfect. But I would say, again, I'll repeat it, if you're going to start, just start small. Start with one.
And do you think that also addresses the question of, but we don't have time for this? How do we add something else to our plate? Is that kind of the same?
So then I might look at, how am I currently structuring my time? And if I made this shift, like, could I carve out this specific time, and who would I be helping? Or it's looking at, where would be the most impact, because maybe if I am carving out this 30 minutes every day, it's shifting my time, but what grows from that might have such a large impact that it's worth the shift in my schedule. And I know every school is different. I know I'm very fortunate to work at a school that's a professional learning community where we have those set blocks of time to collaborate as a whole team, that everyone has the common planning time, and that's not always the case. So then I think it's just about getting creative. You know, can we have lunch together once a week? Let's talk over lunch. Or, hey, can I bring you coffee in the morning and can we just meet for 20, 30 minutes right before school to talk about this? Or, hey, do you have time this afternoon? Can you stay after? Or can I come in during dismissal time? I know your students will still be there, but can we just start to talk or look at it? So it's being present, being flexible, and being willing to, get it started.
And helping your colleagues see the benefit. Why is it worth it to them to switch their schedule, especially if they're, say, a classroom teacher who has done things a certain way for a long time, that it may be a hard shift to make, but kind of how do you help them see that, no, this can be worthwhile, and ultimately it can maybe save everybody time, which is where you want to get to it. You may not feel like that right away, but ultimately that's the goal, right? That you're sort of working smarter and not harder.
Absolutely. I was thinking it's also that phrase, success breeds success. And so once they see that it does work, then they want more of it, so.
And then you can take those examples to your administrators, right? And if your administrator is so inclined, perhaps there can be a gradual shift of sort of finding, this worked well for us, here are the results of it. Are there possibilities of what we can do?
Absolutely. And find your allies. Like, hopefully, I know obviously there's going to be ESOL specialists who are working in isolation and they're only one in the building, but there still could be another teacher there who's on board, who also sees the need and wants to work at it. And again, if you're fortunate, I've only ever worked with a team of ESOL teachers. Thank God, because that's the reason I'm here and I'm doing it, is because of my team. So hopefully you have those other connections that you can go to brainstorm and get creative, to say, like, as a team, how can we really support all of the English learners in our building, and I'd really like to collaborate with this teacher. Can we work together? So that if I'm going here, can you help support over here? So working as a team in that way too.
And I think for those teachers who are working alone in their building and may not have that team setting, looking for people in other schools in the district, or if they're alone in the district even, going online and finding professional... Colorin, Colorado. The ELL chat on Twitter on Monday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern is a great resource, and I know a lot of the educators who've met there have actually then met in person when they've gone to conferences and when they've gone to TESOL, but they clearly value the connections they have there. So I think finding that support, and even I've been participating in webinars where I see that the chat kind of takes over because people get so excited to connect because they're so isolated.
Absolutely.
So I think kind of finding those ideas, and then you can sort of hear from other people, how are they navigating this, because it really is, there are strategies, there are best practices, but it's really you identifying the needs in your school, the needs in your students, the needs that your colleagues have. And it's not a one-size-fits-all.
No, it's finding the best fit,
Right.
Absolutely.
I'd like to, that sort of speaks to a larger theme, which comes from Megan, and she says, how do you get teachers to realize that ELLs are our kids, all of our kids, that we can be a team success for ELLs? How do you make that shift?
Well, again, I've been fortunate that has been the model at my school from the very beginning, that as a team, these are all of our students. It's not just, these are your students, these are my students, so we don't even use the words mine or yours, it's always our students. So I'm thinking if you wanted to make that shift, I would think as an ESOL specialist that I'd want to start by looking globally at all students. So when I'm with the class, and again, maybe start small with the classroom teacher, I'm going to look at their whole class. So instead of saying, let's just look at the English learners, I'd want to show, like, no, let's look at your whole class. Let's see what's going well. Like, oh, look, you know, like, great, they're all doing really well with fractions. Okay, let's build on that. Or, again, observational data, like, your class is really engaged. This is great. Let's use that to now provide some partner talking opportunities, and let's partner up our English learners with these native speakers so that they have those models when they're doing their turn-in talks. So if I can start to look at the whole class instead of just a section of the class, then that kind of models for the classroom teacher that we're looking at everyone, that we're not looking at students only in certain groups or according to certain labels. Like, we're going to look at all of them. And yes, there still might be times where we need to think about groups of students for what they need, but overall, we're going to be looking at the whole class. So even if we start to use a strategy, yes, we want to see how it works with English learners, but we also want to see how it works with the whole class, because, you know, we know that good instruction for English learners is good instruction for all students. So again, we want to build this on the success. So I think if teachers start to see that it's working with all students, then they can also start to see, oh, we're all looking at all students. So.
And that's part of the shift, to seeing the ESOL specialist and the bilingual teacher as someone that can be supportive to all students, and not just kind of, here are 5 kids at table in the back with the ESOL specialist, but you're sharing a strategy, you're sharing a way of doing something that can benefit, as you said, what's good for ELLs is good for everybody. A lot of strategies that are used also to support in universal design for learning and for special education, and they can be supportive as well. And so how can you lift everybody up by using these strategies that are helpful, and that gives them a better understanding of the expertise.
Yeah, and I think it does start with us to see our role in that way, that we're not here just for English learners. We're here for all students. We want to build the success of all students. Because if we start to see it that way and frame it that way, again, that's going to help everyone start to see it that way.
And that, in your school, is unusual in that the way that the PLC is set up in terms of your small group work, different adults do work with different kids depending. So you may end up working with some of the special ed students, or you may end up working with a reading group in the classroom, in the mainstream classroom, that maybe needs a little bit of extra support, and that happens to be the area that you can do. And so the school, and we had mentioned this in our earlier event about special education, the school is very flexible in how it uses the adults' time and thinking, what do our students need and who can meet that need?
Absolutely.
And that was a shift that was really hard, for, particularly for the specialists, right? To say, you know, because there was this, like, these are my kids and I'm expecting and I want to work with my kids.
Right.
What do you mean I'm not working with my kids? What do you mean someone else is working with my kids? That was a change, right?
Absolutely. But it's nice in that, because once you start to see that they're all our students, then you aren't relying on the labels to figure out which students should I be working with, so you really can work with any students. So, you know, it's nice in a team meeting, we're not just talking about, like, well, this group and this group, you know, it's like, okay, well, all of our students need this, who's available to take this group, great, and we'll still group them according to what they need, and then it's who's the best match for what they need. I mean, we even pull in the technology specialist, which is great because they can take a group, and then you think about, like, okay, well, this is a group, they really need engagement. Oh, where our technology specialist really has some ideas for how to engage them on the computer and getting the same kind of learning to happen. So it's not about, well, this is the only person who can work with this group. It's no collective responsibility. We're here for all students, so we can work with all students. And that's actually been really enjoyable for me, because then I get to work with a variety of students, and you might try a strategy with one group and it goes really well, and you're like, well, let me try it with this group. Oh, hey, it works for them too. You know, so it is that flexible grouping that, you know, makes it, again, and that pulls us together as a team, because we're all working towards the same goal for all the same students.
I want to ask you a little bit about sort of specific strategies for co-planning and co-teaching lessons. And you had mentioned that really every teacher has a different style, and so you've had different experiences and what that looks like. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so again, it's building on the teacher's strengths, kind of looking at what are their go-to strategies, because they don't want to put a teacher in a position where they're going to be totally uncomfortable with what I'm suggesting. So I want to say, okay, you're using this, or I see, you know, like you really like to do a lot of turn and talk for your students. Great, let's keep that. Why don't we do 2 turn and talks, and then at the end, why don't we have them get into groups and have a whole group conversation around the same question? So it's just kind of taking it and building on it. But then when it comes to planning that, it's important that we're looking at, okay, what's the objective every day? And I know as our teams, we have that common planning time to do it. But even within that, it might be going back to a specific teacher that I'm working with that week and saying, okay, so based on those plans, how do you want to do it this week? Like, what's going to work for us? You know, do you want me to lead the lesson and you're going to support over here, or are we going to parallel teach the lesson, or you'll do it with this group and I'll do it with this group, and then we'll come back at the end? So it's kind of looking at how is the structure going to work, and again, that's based on what the classroom teacher is comfortable with. And so that's the co-planning piece of it, and then the co-teaching. Similarly, it can look many different ways, and that goes back to being willing to go into the different roles, that it's not just the same person doing the same part of the lesson every time, that we can kind of shake it up, we can do it differently. And then that becomes the place to experiment, because then you're building this safe environment where I have a chance to experiment with something, a new idea I might have, like, well, let me try it out. But then that classroom teacher also has a safe place to experiment and maybe try out some of the things that I've been modeling but they've never done before, and now this is their chance to do it, because, you know, if I've already done it and now they're doing it, I'm not really going to think much of it, but then they feel safe doing it.
And in terms of your team meeting, you serve specific grades, and so you're part of those team meetings.
Yes.
Weekly,
Yes.
sometimes even almost daily, because of the way the sort of the schedule works
Yep.
and different subjects. Talk about your role at the team meeting.
So it always depends. It's not going to be the same week to week, but the one thing that is the same for their planning lessons, I'm always looking at how we're planning through the eyes of an ESOL teacher, so thinking about the language that's involved, the support that English learners are going to need to produce or to show what they know. But at the same time, a lot of times I take the perspective of the actual English learner and think about, so what might be confusing about this? Okay, then what am I going to need to add to support that? And yes, sometimes it's visuals and sometimes it's manipulatives, but sometimes it's just providing a chance for them to talk with one another and learn from each other. Because I realized, okay, they're going to be hearing a lot of this in the lesson. They probably need a chance to talk that out or to process it. So again, I will look at it from a language perspective. I'll look at it from the student's perspective. And then at the meeting, a lot of times I'm advocating for whether it's for certain supports or certain strategies, or just a way of approaching the lessons, whether it's structure or just saying that, like, it's important that we give these supports to our students, because it can be a lot of times like, okay, we don't have time, like we need to keep this short, and then advocating and saying, okay, but if we keep this short, can we build in some time at this point or whatever, because we know that our learners are going to need it. So it's still coming together with the team and supporting the needs of the team, the teacher team, but ultimately supporting the needs of the students so that we're really reaching the higher levels of success.
And have you found that over time, the more you speak up and the more examples you share, that your team begins to make that shift on their own?
Yes, and that is something that I've learned, that it is important to speak up and to say those things. That I'm seeing it, again, I'm seeing it through this lens, and to me it's like, well, it's right there, you know, like, don't they see it? But instead saying, oh, you know, I'm noticing this, and saying that even if the idea, they might not latch onto it the first time, I still need to be continually bringing it up. That because if I'm going to sit in the meeting silently, that's my role, is to speak for English learners and to advocate for them. So if I'm not doing it, there isn't anyone else in the room who's responsible for doing it. Hopefully there's someone else who might still do it, but again, that's what I'm bringing to the team. So it's important that I am voicing any concerns or celebrations, showing things that are working, that's my addition to the team, and so it's an important role that I need to be willing and comfortable to play even when it's hard. So.
And I should mention to our audience that we have actually seen Katie in action in a team meeting and speaking up, and I think the example that I remember was the question in the lesson that was going to be asked by the classroom teacher was, where have you seen this word before? And you said, let's rephrase that and say, have you seen this word before? Because some of the kids, particularly the English language learners, will not. And the point you made was that if you're already starting the lesson with something that's unfamiliar to them and making them feel as though it's something they should have done, they're shutting down from the beginning. So how can we just make a small little change that could have a big impact on how the kid engages with the lesson and overall kind of the feeling in the classroom? And so that seemed like a very powerful example of saying, you're almost there, but we just need to think about this a little bit differently.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I also wanted to ask you about your ESOL team. You've mentioned them before. You did a lot with them, but talk about what you learn from each other, how you support each other, how you help each other.
So we have said that our ESOL office is like the safe haven that we come back. It's actually a running joke because every time we walk into the room, there's always some kind of verbal like, we're just like, it's like coming home. And so we have created a safe place for us as a team, because it is hard work that we're doing every day. And we support each other in that we know it's going to be frustrating, but then we help each other problem solve. And I don't know, I'm really excited this year because it's the 4th year that all of us have been working together. And just to see the growth that our team has made ourselves, you know, like we're still a collaborative team working on other collaborative teams. But we're all very different. If you came into our office and saw, we're not exact clones of each other. We still have our individual styles and personalities, but seeing them all come together has been amazing to see what we've been able to do. And that doesn't mean that it's smooth sailing. You know, we've been joking, like we have our moments of, you know, hitting a roadblock and just having to come to terms with how are we going to solve this kind of thing. But then we've also said the solutions that we come up with to get over the roadblock or get around it, we end up not only getting to where we want to be, but actually to a better place, that the solution we come up with is 10 times better than we were thinking at the beginning. But it's because we were together working on it, not because it was one person's idea and we just went with it. So I, again, love my team, and I wouldn't be here without them. That I have learned everything about being an ESOL teacher from them in our conversations, in the articles that we share with each other, the text messages late at night. I've been thinking about this, you know, but again, that having that safe relationship where we're working on a common goal, but we also know it's okay if we can make mistakes, we can try things out, say that didn't work. I just think like it's made a world of difference, and that's the kind of experience that I want to take out to classroom teachers. And so it's nice to see how it has developed, how we function, and then knowing that that's what we can do on our grade level collaborative teams too. So, but it's great to have a home base to come home to.
Absolutely. And one of your team members, Kimberly, wrote a great article for us about special education and collaboration between special education specialists and ESOL specialists and what you get out of that collaboration.
Absolutely.
So all of you are sort of living and breathing it every day. I think when we all had lunch together, you said you had a collaborative conversation about what we were going to have for lunch that day. So living and breathing collaboration in every way.
Yes. And I guess I should share that there's 4 of us. So I know different schools have different size teams.
Right.
But even if we were a larger team, I'd like to think, again, it's coming together around that common goal and then having that collective responsibility that we each work on different grade levels, but at the end of the day, we are all working together for the English learners at our school.
That's great.
And all students at our school.
I have one quick final question from our audience, and then we're going to be out of time. But Claudia wants to know, what data do you use? So it's a specific question, but I think particularly for people who are looking at a lot of language proficiency and other kinds of information, what role does the data play in collaboration?
Oh, there's a ton of data that we can use. Actually, speaking of teams, if my team member Brianna was here, she would just start going, and she's our data person on the team. But we use classroom data, so that can be exit tickets, or it can be quizzes, it can be tests, but it can also be observational data, what we're noticing. If we're doing reading groups, instead anecdotal notes that we're taking. It can be simple things like listening into a conversation that they're having with peers. You know, like what kind of vocabulary are you using? How are they putting together their sentences? So then you're listening. You can be listening, you can be reading, but you're looking for evidence of how they're using the language. So sometimes it can be pulling a writing sample and analyzing the writing sample. So yes, we do use WIDA, and we use their scores on there kind of as a starting point to say, okay, here's where we know they are, but then we look for evidence in what they're currently doing and using that. So not being solely reliant on just one score, because we all know that those are just a snapshot, and we want to get what they're doing currently and build on that. So when we look at the data, you know, it's looking at, again, whole picture, how are they doing, but then drilling down to, okay, let's get specific. Or, you know, in the student's writing sample, I might look at how did they answer the question, did they answer the question, but then, okay, what kind of structures did they use, what kind of vocabulary did they use, and depending on what our focus is, again, what's our objective, that's going to guide how I analyze the data.
And then your suggestions to your colleagues of where are some areas that we can support, or the needs, or kind of what are our goals, as you had said, for our students as you're looking.
Yeah, and so sometimes it is just listing out, okay, here's what I'm noticing, or like I've taken this selection, or we've looked at all the students' data, and here's what I'm noticing, here are some trends. Okay, do we already have some ideas? Do we already have some things in place that we're doing to try to address that? Okay, if we don't, well, what could we do? And that's kind of the fun part, where we start to brainstorm creative ideas of how to provide support, or what we can do to help boost that area of need. And again, using their strengths to do that. So that is kind of the fun problem-solving piece of it, which is much more enjoyable to do as a team, rather than saying, oh, what am I going to do when it's me by myself? So.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up? That just went by like that.
I know it did, but I just want to say thank you for having me. I don't necessarily feel that I'm an expert in the field, but I certainly love working at this, and knowing that it's a work in progress, continuing to improve. So I just appreciate having the opportunity to share what I'm learning, and hopefully it helps others in the process.
I think it will. I think it will for sure. And we actually have a lot more from Katie. We interviewed her when we visited her school a couple of years ago. We have a long interview with her where she talks not only about collaboration, but some pre-teaching that she was doing in a lunch group, which was really wonderful, some of her reading instruction. We have some footage of her in the classroom, of her team meeting. So you can hear more. You can hear more from the principals at the school about how the schedule is set up, how this PLC is set up. So we have quite a bit from the school, and we'll continue to add more in the future as well. as we put it all together. So thank you, Katie, so much for taking time right before the holidays to be here, and thank all of you for joining us, and thank you to the National Education Association, our partner, for making all of these events possible. We will have a few more in the new year. And thank you always to the AFT as well. So please like this, share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues. I hope you get a lot of great strategies out of this event. And we will look forward to seeing you next time on Facebook Live with Colorin, Colorado. Bye for now. Happy New Year.
Thank you.